Hello all, welcome to today's video on nerve fiber classification and its properties. Before we begin, I would like to clarify the difference between a neuron and a nerve fiber. Unlike in skeletal muscle where a muscle cell and a muscle fiber refers to the same thing, in the nervous system, these terms, a neuron and a nerve fiber, have distinct meanings. So let's get started. The whole nerve cell is referred to as a neuron. So a neuron is made up of three main parts: the cell body, the dendrites and the axon. The cell body contains the nucleus and is like the control center. And the dendrites mainly receive signals from other neurons. But what exactly is a nerve fiber then? A nerve fiber is specifically the axon part of the neuron. The axon part of the neuron is known as the nerve fiber. The axon is responsible for transmitting impulses away from the neuron cell body to other neurons, muscles, glands, right? So what is a nerve fiber? Nerve fiber refers to axon part of the neuron. Clear? So a neuron's job is to process the signals and then send the signal across nerve fiber. But whereas the nerve fiber's job is to just send the signals. So the neuron is the entire cell that processes and transmits the information, whereas a nerve fiber is just one part of the neuron that's responsible for transmitting the impulses. That makes sense, right? So nerve fiber, remember, is the axon part of the neuron. Why am I repeating is, if in the exam the question is to classify nerve fibers, we have to focus on the axon. This means we have to talk about specific characteristics related to the axons, like whether it is myelinated or not, and what is the conduction speed, right? What type of nerve fiber it is. And when we are asked to classify neurons, we consider the whole structure, including the cell body, dendrites and the axon. So we look at features like the number of poles it has, which refers to number of dendrites and axons. For example, there are multipolar, bipolar, unipolar neurons, right? So based on these characteristics, we are going to classify neurons. So in a nutshell, nerve fiber classification focuses on the axon, while the neuron classification looks at the entire structure. Understood? So let's move on to the classification of nerve fibers. Nerve fibers are classified based on the function, based on whether it is myelinated or not, and based on its conduction velocity. That is how fast or slow a nerve fiber is able to transmit the impulse. Let us go one by one. Based on the function, nerve fiber can be classified as a sensory or a motor or a secretomotor nerve fibers. Suppose, when you touch a hot object, sensory receptors called thermoreceptors in your skin detect the extreme temperature, right? These thermoreceptors convert the thermal energy into electrical signals. Sensory nerve fibers, that is specifically A delta fibers and C fibers, transmit these signals. We will be studying about A delta fibers, C fibers and all. But for now, broadly, these sensory fibers carry information from the sensory receptors to the central nervous system. And before even the brain is aware of any information that is carried from the sensory receptor, reflex arc in the spinal cord gets activated. And then, to protect our hand from injury, we have to withdraw our hand, right? So, these sensory neurons communicate with interneurons in the spinal cord, which then send signals via motor neurons to our muscles to pull our hand away from the hot object. So, the sensory neurons carry messages from the receptors while motor neurons carry message from the central nervous system. Sensory nerve fibers are also called as afferent nerve fibers. Motor nerve fibers are also called as efferent nerve fibers. And then we have secretomotor fibers, that are specific types of nerve fibers which are responsible for stimulating the glands to secrete their products. Right? So these fibers are part of autonomic nervous system and they primarily influence exocrine glands, such as it could be sweat glands, salivary glands, or glands in the digestive system. So, based on whether a nerve fiber is myelinated or not, it is now classified as myelinated or unmyelinated. Let us briefly see the difference between our second type of classification, that is based on the myelination. So, if you look at the structure of a myelinated nerve fiber, as the name suggests, myelinated nerve fiber is where the axon is covered by myelin sheath. Myelin sheaths are made up of fatty substances that insulate the axon, but they do not cover the entire length of the axon. It has interruptions which are called as nodes of Ranvier. So, and also it is not present at the axon terminal. As you can see in the picture shown beside, in the axon terminal there is no myelin sheath. And in unmyelinated, as the name suggests, it is not present at all. In the animation shown beside, you can observe the speed of the impulse transmission, right? So it moves faster in myelinated as compared to unmyelinated nerve fiber. The conduction velocity of a myelinated nerve fiber is around 120 meters per second, whereas in unmyelinated nerve fiber, the speed of conduction is only 0.5 to 2 meters per second. And also, if you observe the myelin sheath, as I said already, there is a small gap or indentation in the myelin sheath that surrounds the axons. So, as I said, these are called as nodes of Ranvier, which helps in rapid transmission of electrical signals along the axon, right? As the impulse jumps from one node of Ranvier to the other and then to the other, right? What we call as saltatory conduction. Remember from your schools, what is saltatory conduction? Which is not present in the unmyelinated nerve fiber because there is no myelin sheath, there is no node of Ranvier, so there is no jumping of impulse in unmyelinated nerve fiber. Also, the axon diameter is large in the myelinated nerve fiber and is smaller in the unmyelinated nerve fiber. Myelinated nerve fibers are more energy efficient. What does that mean? It means that myelinated nerve fiber saves a lot of energy as compared to unmyelinated nerve fibers because the impulse in these fibers jumps from one node to the other, right? Whereas in unmyelinated fibers, there's no nodes of Ranvier, there's no myelin sheath, so it requires a lot of energy to transmit the signal. Myelinated nerve fibers are present both in central nervous system as well as peripheral nervous system, whereas unmyelinated nerve fibers are mainly present in the autonomic nervous system. So we are done with the functional classification and classification based on myelination, right? Which was easy to remember, isn't it? Now we shall move on to the classification that is based on the conduction velocity. This classification is little tricky, right? This will require us to engage our memory a bit here, right? So under this classification, we have type A fibers. Type A fibers are again divided into A alpha, A beta, A gamma and A delta fibers. There are 4 types of A type fibers. Which are those? A alpha, A beta, A gamma and A delta fibers. And then we have type B fibers. And then lastly we have type C fibers, which again are divided into 2 types. One is C dorsal root fibers and C sympathetic fibers. As I said earlier, we'll have to put some effort to remember these types of fibers. Clear? The classification that is based on the conduction velocity is also called as Erlanger-Gaser classification. That is because it was developed by Hermann Erlanger and Homer Gaser. These are 2 American physiologists who have got Nobel Prize for their work in this regard, right? So this can come as your 3-mark question to classify nerve fibers based on Erlanger-Gaser classification. What I usually suggest students is, You please write down these important topics in the form of tables or flowcharts and stick them to your cupboards. This way you can easily review and reinforce your knowledge through regular recollection and recall, right? That helps a lot. I used to do that, right? Okay, so let's look at the characteristic features of different types of fibers based on the conduction velocity. So we have 4 different A-type fibers, right? First one is A-alpha. A-alpha has fiber diameter of 13 to 20 micrometer and the conduction velocity is 70 to 120 meters per second. These fibers serves as motor nerve fibers to skeletal muscles and proprioceptive receptors. Next we have A-beta fibers. The diameter of A-beta fibers is 6 to 12 micrometer and the conduction velocity is little less, which is 30 to 70 meters per second, is responsible for touch and pressure sensations. And then we have A-gamma. The fiber diameter is 5 to 8 micrometer. The conduction velocity further decreases here. It's around 15 to 30 meter per second. And again, these are motor to the muscle spindles. And then we have A-delta fibers. The fiber diameter is 1 to 5 micrometer and the conduction velocity here is 12 to 30 meters per second, is responsible for touch, pain and temperature. This is about A-type fibers. These A-type fibers have the fastest conduction velocities, right, as compared to B and C. That is because these are heavily myelinated, which allows rapid signal transmission, right? A fibers are comparatively faster conducting fibers, okay? And next we have B-type fibers. The fiber diameter here is 1 to 3 micrometer and the conduction velocity is 3 to 15 meters per second. And these fibers are autonomic preganglionic fibers. So when we study autonomic nervous system, we will understand what autonomic preganglionic fibers are, okay? And the third type of fibers based on conduction velocity is C fibers, which are again divided into C dorsal root fibers, C sympathetic fibers. C dorsal root fibers have the fiber diameter of 0.2 to 1.5 and the conduction velocity is 0.5 to 2 meter per second. And then we have C sympathetic fibers where the fiber diameter is 0.3 to 1.3 and the conduction velocity is 0.7 to 2.3 meters per second. C dorsal root fibers are responsible for somatic sensations. C sympathetic fibers are mostly postganglionic sympathetic fibers. And these nerve fibers are also numerically classified. A-alpha sometimes is also referred to as type 1 fibers. A-beta fibers sometimes is referred to as type 2 fibers. A-gamma is referred to as type 3 fibers. C fibers are referred to as type 4 fibers. Okay, just for your knowledge, these are classified numerically also. These nerve fibers again can be classified based on how easily they are influenced or damaged by substances like drugs, temperature or toxins or hypoxia. Some are more sensitive and some are less sensitive, right? This is important to understand how different treatments work in the nervous system, right? So based on that, we can classify the nerve fibers which are susceptible to hypoxia, the nerve fibers which are susceptible to high pressure, that which are susceptible to local anesthesia and their functions, right? So functions we already know of these fibers. Now the susceptibility, right? If you look at A-delta and beta fibers, they are very high susceptibility. They have very high susceptibility for hypoxia. Hypoxia is decreased oxygen supply to the tissues, right? And then if you look at A-alpha, A-beta and A-gamma, they are highly susceptible to pressure changes. And if you look at A-delta and C fibers, they are highly susceptible to local anesthesia. Okay, just for your knowledge, I would recommend you write this also and stick to your cupboards and keep looking at it and recall. Right? That's about the classification of nerve fibers. We are done with the classification of nerve fibers. Okay. Now let's move on to the properties of a nerve fiber. The properties of a nerve fiber includes excitability, conductivity, refractory period, all or none law, summation, accommodation, and fatigability. Right? How can we remember this? You can remember it this way. Every cat really acts superbly and uniquely. The first letter from each word gives us the properties of a nerve fiber. That is, every, excitability, cat, conductivity, really, refractory period, acts, all or none law, superbly, summation, and accommodation, uniquely, and fatigability. Easy way to remember, right? Okay, so these are the properties of a nerve fiber. Firstly, let us learn about excitability. Excitability refers to the ability of a cell, specifically a nerve cell or a neuron, to respond to change in its external or the internal environment. Excitability is very essential for things like sensations, reflexes, and communication within the nervous system. These nerve fibers can be stimulated or excited by various types of changes, or we call it as stimuli, right, in the environment. It could be mechanical stimuli, right, where physical pressure or a stretch would stimulate the nerve fiber or excite the nerve fiber. It could be thermal change, right, change in the temperature such as cold or heat, that would also stimulate the nerve fiber. And it could be chemicals that could stimulate the nerve fiber, or it could be change in the electrical potential that could stimulate a nerve fiber. So when electrical stimulus is used to excite the nerve fibers, they can be easily manipulated in terms of frequency and strength, right? So whenever we talk about nerve fiber excitation, we usually mean electrical signals, because we can easily manipulate electrical signals with strengthened the frequency and the duration and study the response. Right? What do we understand by strength of stimulus? It is the intensity or the magnitude of the electrical stimulus, right? So if the stimulus is strong enough, it will trigger an action potential. Or if it is too weak, there won't be any action potential that will be generated. And also, what do we understand by frequency of stimulus? It is the rate at which electrical stimulus is applied. Again, higher frequency stimulation can lead to action potential generation, right? So the strength, duration, and the frequency of stimulus determines the excitability of a nerve fiber. Apart from this, the extracellular calcium levels can also affect excitability, right? So if molecular mechanism is asked, you are going to write about extracellular calcium levels that affect the excitability. Let's see how it affects, right? Whenever there is high extracellular calcium, it stabilizes the cell membrane. What do we understand by stabilization of cell membrane? We have different channels on the cell membrane, right? We have sodium channels, we have sodium potassium ATPase, we have calcium channels, we have different channels. Stabilization of cell membrane refers to, let us understand it this way, okay? Stabilization of cell membrane refers to tightness of cell membrane, where the permeability of these channels reduces, right? Whenever there is high calcium levels, cell membrane becomes tight. In other words, there's increased stabilization of the cell membrane, which reduces the sodium channel permeability. Now what happens if sodium channel permeability decreases? The sodium entry into the cell will not take place. If sodium does not enter the cell, excitation of the cell does not take place. So whenever there is high calcium level, in the extracellular fluid, it's difficult to excite a nerve fiber. Opposite for low extracellular calcium levels. So, if there is low extracellular calcium levels, it destabilizes the cell membrane. Destabilization of cell membrane refers to, let's understand this way, it loosens up the cell membrane, which increases the sodium channel permeability. So, sodium ions start moving inside the nerve fiber in more numbers. So, now it's easier for a neuron to reach the threshold level, and this now increases the nerve excitability. Clear? So, what are the factors that affect the excitability of a nerve fiber? It is the strength of the stimulus, it is the frequency of the stimulus, it is the duration of the stimulus, it is also affected by extracellular calcium levels. Next we move on to the next property, which is conductivity. As we just saw, if strength of the stimulus is enough to reach the threshold and there is an action potential generated, it propagates along the nerve fiber or along the axon to its terminal, which is referred to as conductivity. If the action potential is generated in the middle of an axon, it can travel in both the directions. But in most of the nerve fibers, nerve impulse travels from cell body towards the axon terminal, right? So, that is referred to as orthodromic conduction. What is orthodromic conduction? It is conduction of nerve impulse from the cell body towards the axon terminal. If the impulse is conducted in opposite direction, right, that is from the terminal towards the cell body, then it is referred to as antidromic conduction. Okay. Now, a small homework for you all to find out an example where we see antidromic conduction of impulse. Okay. I'll be seeing your comments. Let's see how many of you know the answer or how many of you have made an effort to search for the answer. Okay. So, we are done with excitability, we are done with conductivity. Let's move on to the third property, which is refractory period. Refractory. The term refractory generally means resistant to change or action, right? The refractory period in this context refers to resting time, right? Resting time of a nerve after it fires an action potential, after it generates an action potential, right? After it generates an action potential, during this time the nerve cannot fire another signal, or it can only fire again if the signal is extra strong, right? This property is known as the refractory period. Why does it happen? What is the significance of refractory period of a nerve fiber? It helps to prevent signals from going backwards. So, the refractory period ensures that the nerve signal only travels forward and doesn't go backward. It also controls how often signals are sent. So, it stops the nerve from firing too quickly or too often, which helps keep everything working smoothly. There won't be any confusion. Okay. So, there won't be any confusion, there won't be any overstimulation of a nerve, right? For that reason, refractory period is very, very important. There are two phases of refractory period, okay? One is absolute refractory period, one is relative refractory period. Absolute refractory period is period which immediately following an action potential when the neurons cannot generate another action potential. No matter how strong the stimulus is, the nerve fiber is not going to respond. And why does that happen? It happens due to inactivation of sodium channels. We require sodium ions to move inside the cell membrane, right, to cause an excitation, right? This inactivation of sodium channels during this period of time, so there won't be any excitation generated or action potential generated, and this period is known as absolute refractory period. And then comes relative refractory period. During this phase, the neuron can generate another action potential, but however, the condition is the stimulus must be of stronger strength than usual. Okay? This is because there will be some sodium channels that would have returned to their resting state. But remember, the neuron is still in hyperpolarized state due to potassium ions leaving the cell. You'll understand this when we study action potential, right? But however, remember, during relative refractory period, we have some amount of sodium channels that have come back to the resting state. For this reason, you can stimulate a nerve fiber, but the strength should be stronger than the usual one. Got it? So that is referred to as relative refractory period. So that was our third property. The first one was excitability, second one was conductivity, the third one was refractory period. And the next and the fourth one is all or none law. If the stimulus is strong enough to reach a threshold level, then the nerve will send a full signal. If the stimulus is too weak and does not reach the threshold level, the signal will not be sent at all. Okay? If it reaches the threshold level, it generates action potential. If it does not reach the threshold level, it does not produce any action potential. So, whenever a nerve fiber fires, it sends a full and clear signal every time. There are no weak signals, there are no partial signals. This is very, very important because this process guarantees that the information that is being passed along the nerve is strong and it is definite information. And there won't be any confusion, right? So the all or none law allows the nervous system to communicate precisely. It could be sensory input or a motor response. The signal should be precise, right? So if we have to lift a water bottle and drink, our hand should straight away go to the bottle, stop at the bottle, hold the bottle and then we drink water. Our hand should not overshoot the bottle, right? Or it should not undershoot. So that precision takes place because of all or none law, right? So that was just an example how precisely the communication takes place between the neurons. Okay. So what happens is once the stimulus reaches the threshold level, right? In case of a nerve fiber, the resting membrane potential is minus 70 millivolt and the threshold that has to be reached is minus 55 millivolt. If the stimulus reaches minus 55 millivolt, then the voltage gated channels open. The sodium ions rush into the cell, causing a rapid change in the membrane potential which is called as the depolarization. So once the threshold is reached, the action potential will always occur and that will always be of the same size and strength, regardless of how much stronger the stimulus is beyond the threshold. Does not make any difference, right? That is the principle of all or none law. Got it? And the next property of a nerve fiber is summation. So far, we learned that if signal does not reach threshold level, it will not evoke action potential, right? However, for a signal which is sub-threshold, to reach the threshold, we can add them up, sum them up, right? Imagine, you have several friends pushing the swing. If only one person pushes at a time, the swing might not move much. But if several people push the swing at the same time, it will move higher, right? In the same way, if different neurons send signal to one single neuron, if multiple signals, right, from different synapses come in at once and their effects add up, there will be combined signals which are strong enough. they can push the neuron's membrane potential past the threshold and trigger an action potential. Right? Now what's happening? There are many neurons which are stimulating one single neuron. And this is referred to as spatial summation. Right? Spatial summation. Now imagine you have a friend who pushes the swing over and over again. But each time they push, they do it with little faster rate. So if they push quickly enough, the swing will keep going higher and higher. If the signals are sent fast enough, the neurons does not have time to return to its resting state between the signals. The signals add up and can push the neuron to its threshold, causing it to fire an action potential. Right? Now this is called as temporal summation, where there is repeated signal from the same synapse. Okay? This causes temporal summation and causes or generates an action potential. So we understand what is spatial summation, right? Too many friends pushing one swing is spatial summation. One friend repeatedly pushing the swing is temporal summation. Clear? Relate that to our neuron. Many synapses sending signal to one neuron, one single neuron, is spatial summation. One synapse repeatedly stimulating the other neuron is temporal summation. Clear, right? Now let's move on to the next property, which is accommodation. Let me explain this with an example. Right? Imagine wearing a watch on your wrist. So when you first put it on, you feel it pressing against your skin. However, after a while you stop noticing it or feeling it. Right? This is because your nerve endings in that particular area have adapted to a constant pressure that's coming from the watch that you're wearing. So you no longer feel it unless something changes, like the watch moving or it becoming tighter. Right? Until then you'll not even notice that you are wearing a watch. That is called as adaptation. When the nerve endings become less sensitive to a constant stimulus over time. So this helps our body to focus on a new or changing information. Right? And also this prevents the overstimulation. Right? Understood? Easy, right? And the last one, the last property is unfatigability. We have seen the property of all or none law, right? Nerve fibers generate action potential following all or none principle, ensuring each action potential is full and consistent. So, unlike muscles, nerve fibers do not get tired or fatigued after repeated use, right? They can keep sending electrical signals as long as needed without losing their ability to function. The reason for that is, one is it follows all or none law. Second is because the sodium-potassium pump continuously maintains the ion gradients. And these ion channels, they rapidly open and close for consistent firing. And the neurons have high supply of ATP. Energy is supplied continuously. Right? Because they have high density of mitochondria, which ensures this continuous supply of ATP. There's production of ATP, there's supply of ATP. Right? And myelination of nerve fiber, which allows rapid and saltatory conduction. Right? Saltatory conduction, we studied, it is energy saving. Right? Energy efficient. So it reduces metabolic load. Right? And the axon diameter. As the axon diameter increases, there is lower electrical resistance. And what happens with neurotransmitters? Neurotransmitters, after its work is done, the neurotransmitter is broken down, is acetylcholine for that reason, right? It is reutilized for recycling of neurotransmitters, right? There's neurotransmitter recycling. And let's take an example of acetylcholine. We have acetylcholine esterase in the synaptic cleft, right? After acetylcholine is released, some of the acetylcholine gets broken down by acetylcholine esterase. Some of the acetylcholine goes and binds to acetylcholine receptors. After the acetylcholine receptors work is done, these acetylcholine receptors in the synaptic cleft are broken down by acetylcholine esterase. So there is enzymatic breakdown of neurotransmitter. By doing so, it prevents overstimulation and supports continuous activity. You get it right? So that is about unfatigability, why there is unfatigability of a nerve fiber. With this, we are done with the properties of a nerve fiber. So let us quickly summarize what we have studied. We have studied the classification of a nerve fiber. Based on function, we classify it as sensory, motor, secretomotor. Based on myelination, we divide it into myelinated and unmyelinated nerve fibers. Based on the conduction velocity, it is again divided into A-type fibers, B-type and C-type fibers. Again in A-type, we have A alpha, A beta, A gamma and A delta. We have two types of C fibers, C dorsal root fibers and C sympathetic fibers. And we have B fibers, right? So we have seen the characteristic features of these fibers, how susceptible they are to hypoxia, how susceptible they are to local anesthesia, how susceptible they are to pressure changes, right? And what else did we study? We studied the properties of a nerve fiber, right? The properties of a nerve fiber include excitability, conductivity, refractory period, all or none law, summation, accommodation and unfatigability. Every cat really acts superbly and uniquely, right? Okay then. That's it for today's video. If you like the explanation, please subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon and share the video with your friends. Thank you.